What's up, movie fans? Hey guys, it has been a while since I have made a full video. I have been busy with college stuff recently, but I'm back to do my very first director filmography ranking. So, if you don't know, there are a lot of film YouTubers who do this, most notably Sean Chandler and Shafe Willis Productions. Basically, what they do is they watch every single movie that was made by a certain director and then rank them all from worst to best. This is actually something that I have wanted to do for a little while now, just because I think that sounds like a really fun idea. And so I am finally starting it with who I would say is one of the most well-known and famous directors of all time, Tim Burton. I feel like Tim Burton is just one of those directors that, like, even casual people who aren't that into movies, they know who Tim Burton is. He is a director that just has a very distinct style where he makes movies that are simultaneously scary and funny. That is his whole thing. And since it was just spooky season last month in October, I decided that I wanted to watch all 20 of Tim Burton's movies and rank them all. So yeah, today I am going to be ranking every Tim Burton movie. I would just like to clarify two things before we start. One, I didn't know that Shafe Willis Productions was also doing this. I swear I started this video before he uploaded his ranking. That was just an unfortunate coincidence. And two, Nightmare Before Christmas does not count for this list. I am very sorry. I know that Nightmare Before Christmas is widely considered a Tim Burton movie, but it's not. He did not direct Nightmare Before Christmas. He was involved, but he was not the director. Therefore, the movie does not count as his movie. It counts as Henry Selick's movie. So, yeah, I'm very sorry. If you're curious, I would probably put Nightmare Before Christmas at number 6 on this list, but I am not actually including it. Anyway, getting into the ranking, number 20, the worst Tim Burton movie, I'm gonna have to go with Dumbo. So, Tim Burton made 2 Disney live-action remakes. I ranked every Disney live-action remake a few years ago in 2023, and I did not enjoy that experience because I thought that most Disney live-action remakes were really bad adaptations that completely misunderstood the point of the original movies. And on that list, I actually didn't have Dumbo that low. I had it like in the midpoint of the list because I thought it was just all right. But upon rewatching Dumbo for this ranking, I realized this is the most soulless movie that Tim Burton has made. Tim Burton is a director who is known for having a very distinct style, and this movie, it feels like Disney really had him on a leash and he just wasn't able to go all out with his style. And so this movie just kind of feels like a generic kids movie that goes through the most generic kids movie beats possible. There's a bunch of very good actors in this movie who just feel like they aren't trying. Colin Farrell is here playing generic dad character. Michael Keaton plays generic villain. Danny DeVito plays unfunny comic relief. Eva Green plays generic love interest. And, like, none of them get anything interesting to do. And then there's also kids in this movie, and, like, I don't mean to be mean, but they're just not very good actors. I feel very mean saying that with child actors sometimes, but these kids just really weren't that great. This movie also has a shockingly prominent anti-corporate message, which feels very, very weird coming out of a Disney movie, and it feels very hypocritical. I don't know, just upon rewatch, I really was just bored by this movie. Nothing about it jumped out at me as interesting. I found Dumbo to be cute, and that's really all I have to say about this movie. So yeah, this is my least favorite movie that Tim Burton has made. Number 19, Alice in Wonderland. I'm sorry, I am putting Tim Burton's live-action remakes at the bottom of the list because I just really don't like Disney live-action remakes. Alice in Wonderland, it's a movie that has its fans. It's a movie where I definitely think it's better than Dumbo because at least with this movie, you can feel Tim Burton's style in the movie, but I'm honestly just not sure that Tim Burton was the right fit for Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland by nature is supposed to be this very dreamlike episodic story where it doesn't really have a narrative. It's just kind of following Alice going through these ridiculous scenarios, meeting these kooky characters. It is a movie that is ridiculous and absurd, but simple in its execution. And this movie, this version of the story, is none of that. This movie takes all of the stuff in Alice in Wonderland and squishes it through this generic blockbuster template where the movie is this big fantasy story where it's all about Alice and the Wonderland characters standing up to the Queen of Hearts, who is this tyrannical ruler. It's this weird hero's journey story where the movie literally ends with Alice fighting a dragon with a sword, and it's like, that's not what Alice in Wonderland is. You took this story, took everything that makes it special away, and turned it into this generic fantasy story. Beyond that, the movie just looks terrible. I am sorry, but this movie's color palette is boring, and it's like CGI just looks very, very odd, and it just doesn't look good in my opinion. So yeah, I'm sorry, I've just never really been a fan of Tim Burton's take on Alice in Wonderland. Number 18, Planet of the Apes. So interesting thing about this movie, this is the first Planet of the Apes movie that I have ever seen. I have never seen a Planet of the Apes movie before. When I started this ranking, I kind of forgot that Tim Burton made a Planet of the Apes reboot, and later I was like, oh crap, this movie, which I have heard is terrible, is going to be the first Planet of the Apes movie I see. That's an unfortunate coincidence. This was my first exposure to Planet of the Apes, and it is a very, very boring movie. I don't know, the whole movie is Mark Wahlberg ends up on this planet that is ruled by ape humanoid creatures. All of the humans are enslaved. He rescues a few humans. He makes friends with some of the apes who are kind of advocating for human rights. And then they wander the wilderness for the whole movie until there's a final battle. It is a very boring film. I was not engaged while watching it. I found myself just zoning out several times. It did not keep my attention. Mark Wahlberg feels bored in this movie. He doesn't feel like he's trying at all. There is an ape creature played by Helena Bonham Carter, who Mark Wahlberg has a romantic relationship with, which is just so very strange in so many different ways. The villain is played by Tim Roth. He is a generic villain who is just constantly angry. I don't know. I truly don't really have a lot to say about this one. This movie was just mostly very boring, very not Tim Burton. I guess the practical effects that they did with the apes looked good. The ending of the movie was just stupid, where Mark Wahlberg makes it back to Earth, and then they have this boom, shock ending where it turns out now Earth is ruled by apes, and it's like, what does that even mean? What the heck are you talking about? Were they trying to make a sequel to this movie? Because that didn't work out. Yeah, just a very bizarre film that I did not enjoy. Number 17, Dark Shadows. So this is a very strange movie made by Tim Burton. It is based on an old TV show about a vampire, I guess, and his family in the modern day or something like that. And so this movie is a comedy about a vampire who gets buried alive and then wakes up in the modern day. And it can be funny at times. I'm not going to lie. It is kind of funny to see this vampire adjusting to normal life in the modern day. Johnny Depp plays the vampire, and I actually really like Johnny Depp as an actor, and I think that in this movie, he is actually pretty funny. He has some great comedic moments while this vampire is trying to get used to the world. But here's the big problem with Dark Shadows. It doesn't have a plot. This movie is the definition of a things just sort of happen movie where there's no rhyme or reason to anything. There's no narrative. It's just things happen and then other things happen, and that is the movie. The movie has a villain who is played by Eva Green, and she's fun, but she doesn't really do a lot to actively drive the plot forward. The vampire's family really just doesn't matter that much to this movie. They all feel generic. They all feel barely fleshed out. There's a romantic relationship in this movie that I felt nothing for. And so, it could have been a funny movie, but it just doesn't have a story. And that's kind of important when you're making a movie. Number 16, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, about a month ago, while I was making this video, I posted a photo of me and Movie Friend, because we watched this movie together, and it was us with really shocked, disturbed faces, and I had a caption guess which movie disturbed us to this extent. It was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That was the movie. We were baffled by how bizarre this movie is. Now, I'll say this. I don't think my dislike of this movie is necessarily the movie's fault, because to be completely honest, I'm just not that big of a Willy Wonka fan. I have never really been into this story. I think that this story is very, very weird. It's basically a horror movie for kids, where it's about Willy Wonka inviting kids into his chocolate factory, and then they all almost die in these increasingly disturbing ways. And I don't know, I've never really been into that story. And this version of it was no exception, since it is just kind of a standard retelling of the Willy Wonka story. The Oompa Loompa songs were the thing that disturbed me the most in this movie. Those songs felt like fever dreams. I think the one saving grace that this movie has is I genuinely do enjoy Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka. I think it's kind of funny how quirky he is in this movie, where he's just such a weird character. Charlie really doesn't matter to this movie. I think it's funny that this is the version of the story that is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because he really doesn't matter past the first 30 minutes of the movie. Number 15, Mars Attacks. Alright, so this one, from what I understand, is a little bit controversial, me having it this low, because I talked to both Movie Friend and Movie Fan Hater about this list, and they were both shocked and appalled when they heard how low I had Mars Attacks. I don't know. I just really wasn't that into this movie. I kind of appreciate what the movie is, where it's kind of Tim Burton making a B movie with an A-list cast, and that's kind of a fun idea. But also, I don't know, I didn't really find the movie to be that funny. Like, I did chuckle at it a few times while watching it, but like, it's more funny because it's random than funny because it actually has funny jokes. Like, the whole movie is just one joke of aliens invade Earth, the humans underestimate them and think that they're coming in peace, and then the aliens kill them all. Like, that is the whole joke of this movie. It does, in fact, have an A-list cast. This is probably the most A-list cast that any Tim Burton movie has, where it has Jack Nicholson, Pierce Brosnan, Sarah Jessica Parker, Glenn Close, Annette Bening, Martin Short, Natalie Portman, Jack Black, Danny DeVito. Like, it is just a stacked cast. And none of the characters really matter that much. Like, they're all just kind of there to be in the movie for a few minutes and then die. And so, I don't know. I was just kind of baffled by this movie. It had some fun moments, but it's just kind of a very weird movie. Number 14, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Tim Burton's take on the X-Men is what this movie essentially is, since it's about a school for a bunch of children with superpowers. And I'm not gonna lie, I think that's an interesting concept coming from Tim Burton, where, like, he is a director that just has a style where if you explore a bunch of kids with supernatural powers, that can be kind of cool from his perspective. But I felt like this movie just had a lot of issues where I feel like the movie takes way too long to really introduce you to the main threat, where throughout the whole movie, the main kid knows that there is a villain, but he doesn't know anything about the villain, and then you don't learn who the villain is and what his deal is until like an hour into the movie. And then when the villain does show up and he's played by Samuel L. Jackson, I'm not gonna lie, I think Samuel L. Jackson kind of ruined this movie, which, like, that pains me to say because it's Samuel L. Jackson. Like, he's never ruined any movie, but with this movie, he just feels way too goofy and out of place for the tone that the movie was going for. And then also, the movie's plot just raises some very weird questions when, like, you consider the fact that in this movie, the kid falls in love with this one girl, but because of time travel shenanigans, he's dating his grandpa's ex. And that is weird. That just makes this movie feel very, very weird. So, yeah, I just wasn't that into Miss Peregrine's. It had some fun ideas. It had a fun final battle. But as a whole, I was kind of disappointed by this movie. Number 13. All right, here we go. This is one of my biggest hot takes when it comes to Tim Burton. Number 13, Batman Returns. I am not a fan of the Tim Burton Batman movies. I'm sorry, I have just never been a fan of them. I think that both of Tim Burton's Batman movies are very flawed in very different ways. And with Batman Returns, I think that this movie is very mediocre. To me, Batman Returns isn't a Batman movie, it is a Tim Burton movie that happens to feature Batman. And, like, okay, that can be kind of cool, but I'm just not a fan of Tim Burton's take on the Penguin or Catwoman. I don't like those characters being supernatural creatures. Those characters are two Batman villains who don't have supernatural powers. Like, there are Batman villains that you can use in a supernatural story, like Clayface, Solomon Grundy, Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, but using Penguin and Catwoman is weird. I don't like Catwoman as this weird zombie woman, and I don't like Penguin as this little penguin goblin man. And so, yeah, no, I've, like, never really liked his take on those characters. I don't like Penguin as a villain. I admit, Danny DeVito was perfect casting for the Penguin, but in this movie, he just spends the entire movie talking about how much he wants to bang Catwoman. And, like, he's just, like, he's too horny. Like, I can't take him seriously as a villain when one of his only character traits is he's just horny. And then the other weird thing about this movie is the fact that Batman isn't the main character. He's not even close. He doesn't really have an impact on this movie. He doesn't even really show up that much in this movie until like 45 minutes in. And so, yeah, no, I've just never really been a fan of Batman Returns. I do like Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as Catwoman, even though I don't really like her being a zombie lady. I think Michelle Pfeiffer did a great job. And I actually was kind of invested in the romance between Selina and Bruce. But as a whole, this is a movie that I've never been a fan of. Number 12, Big Eyes. This movie was interesting. This is a true story about a woman named Margaret Keane, who was an artist who painted these really interesting paintings of children with big eyes, and the paintings became very famous, but her husband, Walter Keane, took credit for all of them. And so this movie explores their relationship, and then after they got a divorce, the court case that followed where Margaret tried to prove that all of the paintings were hers. It's a very interesting true story that I think could have made for an amazing movie, but I wasn't that into the actual movie that Tim Burton made. It started out great. I really liked the way that they started the movie with Amy Adams playing this very convincing version of Margaret where she gets easily manipulated by Christoph Waltz, who is playing her husband, and he's this very charismatic con man. And I kind of liked their dynamic, and I liked the way that the movie was kind of playing out. But then, as the movie goes on, I thought that Christoph Waltz became way too much of an over-the-top cartoon villain, and as a result, as we got towards the end of the movie, I kind of stopped taking this movie's portrayal of events seriously, and I think that that is a big problem because this is a true story. It should be very easy to portray the events seriously, but yeah, I don't know, I just kind of felt like they had some missteps in the way that they portrayed the character of Walter. It's still not a bad movie. I actually think this is the first movie on the list that I would give a positive weighting to, because I think that in general, Amy Adams' performance in this movie is great. It does frame this story in an interesting way for most of the movie. It just kind of had some missteps as we got to the end. Number 11, Batman, Tim Burton's first Batman movie, and I like this one significantly more than Batman Returns. But this is another one where I've never really had, like, any strong, passionate feelings for it. Because, like, this movie feels like it is designed for people who don't know who Batman is. And, like, that's fine, because this movie came out in 1989, and back then, people really didn't know that much of who Batman was, because their only exposure to him was from the 60s show. But for me, I've always found the movie to be a little bit boring to revisit, because I already know that Batman's parents were shot in an alleyway, and that is kind of portrayed as a twist in this movie. But so I never really felt like they managed to explore this story that much from Batman's perspective, because for most of the movie, you're kind of seeing him through the eyes of Vicky Vale, and I've just never really found that to be that interesting.
This is off script. I just have to say to all the movie fan viewers, this man is wrong. Batman is Tim Burton's best Batman movie, and it's amazing. This is staying in the video. Batman supporters, stand against this lunatic right here.
Okay,
this guy.
We'll see if that stays in the
movie
video.
fan? No, movie fan. You are wrong.
Anyway, continuing talking about this movie.
You're wrong.
The one truly great element of it that I do have no issues with is Jack Nicholson's Joker, which is a good thing because he takes up a large chunk of the movie, and he's just a very fun, entertaining villain. I've never had any problems with him. He's definitely the best part of the movie. So yeah, at least that's in there, but I don't know, I've just never really found this to be that interesting compared to any other Batman movie that we've gotten in the last, 20 years. Okay, moving into the top 10, Beetlejuice. So, Beetlejuice, I would say, is one of the Tim Burton movies with the most passionate fan base, and I get it, but also, me personally, I've never really been, a massive fan of this movie. I still like it. I still recognize that this is a very fun movie. It is essentially a haunted house movie from the perspective of the ghosts, which is just an interesting, creative idea. And I do think the movie can be very fun and creative, especially as you explore Tim Burton's version of the afterlife and just how absurd and odd it is. That's a lot of fun to explore. Beetlejuice himself is a really fun character, even though he doesn't actually appear in this movie that much. But it's just Michael Keaton playing this crazy demon man, and I think that he is a lot of fun in this movie when he does show up. There are a lot of elements of this movie that I find to be very, very fun and creative, but the big thing with me is that I've always found this movie to be a little bit too absurd. It throws a lot at you in a very, very short period of time, and it kind of just expects you to go with it. And as a result, I've always found this movie to be a little bit messy. It's a very fun mess, but it's still kind of a mess in my opinion. And so, yeah, this is a movie where I get the appeal. I understand why people find it to be so much fun, because it is fun to just kind of go on this journey that doesn't make a lot of sense. But to me, I've never been that huge of a fan of Beetlejuice. And so, as a result, here's another hot take. Number 9, Beetlejuice. I think Beetlejuice is better than the first movie. I don't know how people are going to feel about that, but yeah, I think this movie essentially takes everything that the first movie did and just has a little bit more fun with it. Where In the first movie, you spend most of the movie in the haunted house. In this movie, you spend most of the movie in the afterlife, and I think that that is more fun. Like, it's more fun to explore Tim Burton's weird, wacky view of the afterlife more in depth. And so I have a lot more fun with this movie than the first movie. Beetlejuice is in the second movie way more, even though he's still not the main character, which I think is kind of funny. But, like, yeah, I actually do think that Michael Keaton is kind of funnier in this movie than he is in the first movie, with a lot of the really absurd things that they do with him and exploring his very wacky backstory. I think that the third act of this movie is just so absurd in all of the best ways possible, with the just ridiculous wedding scene where all of the plot lines in this movie converge. People do tend to refer to this movie as overstuffed, but to me, that's always been a weird criticism, because that's implying that the first movie wasn't overstuffed. Like, you're implying that that movie had a reasonable and balanced plot. Like, no, this movie and the first movie are both equal levels of absurd. And I just find the second movie to be a little bit more fun than the first movie.
Oh, hey, movie fan.
Uh-huh.
You said his name 3 times.
Oh, crap, did I?
Yeah, you said his name, and then you said the next 2. You might have,
Hopefully that doesn't come back. Number 8, Sleepy Hollow, Tim Burton's take on the classic Headless Horseman short story. So this is a movie that I've always seen clips of, because my dad actually watches this movie every year around Halloween. This year was the first time that I have ever watched the whole movie for the first time, and I think that from a directing standpoint, this is one of Tim Burton's most interesting movies. This is just a story where his style and aesthetic fits perfectly. And so I think that this movie, from a visual standpoint, just looks really, really cool. The production design is amazing. Like, I think that this is one of Tim Burton's most well-directed movies. And then the Headless Horseman himself is easily the best part of the movie. Every time that he shows up, like, he is framed in a way that manages to make him spooky and scary. And I actually just really love pretty much every sequence in this movie actually involving the Horseman. And then it's also an interesting movie because Tim Burton kind of adds his own spin to this story by making it this whodunit mystery movie where you find out that somebody is controlling the Headless Horseman, and throughout the movie you're trying to figure out who it is. I think that that mystery was actually pretty well done. I did not expect it to be the person who it was. So that was pretty well done. I really liked Johnny Depp in this movie as Ichabod Crane, where he's kind of just this very, very overly dramatic detective, and I thought that that was a really, really funny interpretation of the character. With all of that being said, while I do enjoy a lot of elements in this movie, I will definitely say I didn't really care that much about the characters in this movie. I was not invested in the entire romance plotline going on with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci. I just didn't really care that much about that. I didn't care about the whole, like, mentor dynamic that Johnny Depp had with the one kid. I don't know. I just didn't really care that much about the characters. So it's still a very enjoyable, well-directed movie. I just kind of wish I cared a little bit more about the actual characters that you're following. Number 7, Frankenweenie. This movie is fascinating because it is kind of a passion project that Tim Burton had throughout his entire career, because he actually made a short film before his very first movie, which this movie is kind of based on. And I think that this is just a very fun, imaginative movie where the movie is just Frankenstein, but with a dog. And that's just a fun concept that the movie plays out very well. I do think this is an insanely creative movie. I love the character designs and the design of this world. I love that the whole thing is in black and white. And then I love how bonkers the third act of this movie gets, where it's just becomes this monster movie where there's a bunch of monstrous resurrected pets that are just attacking the city. And yeah, no, I thought that was a lot of fun. And this is also one of the more emotional movies that Tim Burton has made, because the entire movie does center around a dead dog. And so it can be a pretty sad movie, but it can also kind of be like this very touching story at the same time, where it has like these themes about like grief and letting go that it doesn't really beat you over the head with, but they're still very prevalent. And like, yeah, no, I thought that this was a pretty heartfelt, good movie. I do honestly wish that the dog actually had more of an effect on the movie's plot, because I'm not gonna lie, outside of the implications of you being able to resurrect a pet, the dog doesn't actually contribute that much to his own movie, but still, it's a solid, fun movie. Number 6, Corpse Bride, the other stop-motion movie that Tim Burton made, since, once again, Nightmare Before Christmas does not count for this list. And I thought that Corpse Bride was just a very fun movie, all about this very awkward love triangle where Johnny Depp's character accidentally proposes to a ghost, and that's the entire plot of this movie, about him being in this awkward situation where he's supposed to marry the human woman Victoria, but now he's caught up with this ghost lady Emily. And like, yeah, no, I did really enjoy the awkwardness and absurdity of this movie's premise. I thought that it was a lot of fun. Once again, this is another movie where Tim Burton explores his very bonkers version of the afterlife, and that can be a lot of fun. There are some fun songs in this movie, and then I think the movie itself actually does just have this really interesting emotional core, where Johnny Depp, like, doesn't want to marry Emily, the corpse bride. He wants to be with Victoria. But at the same time, in this movie, it does a very good job at making you feel very, very bad for Emily because of how messed up her life was and how messed up, like, everything that has happened to her was. And so, yeah, no, it's a very interesting, fun, creative movie that has an emotional core to it. I don't really have a ton to say about this one. I just thought that Corpse Bride was solid. Number 5. Alright, I think that this is the spot on the list where we start to get into the Tim Burton movies that I actually just really enjoy. All 5 of these movies are great in my opinion. Starting with number 5, Sweeney Todd. So going into this movie, I really didn't know a lot about the movie outside of it's a musical and it's about a barber who kills people. And like those two things were like, I don't even really know how you combine those into a movie. So going into the movie, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. And what I got was just a very, very interesting story about this man being driven to take revenge on the people who have wronged him in his life because of this very tragic story that happened to him. And like, it is a very fascinating movie where it's able to be this fun musical with these very catchy, entertaining songs, but at the same time, it is this horrifying story about this man descending into madness and revenge and just killing people in these very brutal, memorable ways. I think that this is one of Johnny Depp's best performances on this entire list. He was actually nominated for an Oscar for this movie, and I think that that was well deserved because he just really manages to portray this man totally driven by revenge and unable to feel literally anything else other than just constant rage and hatred. I thought that he did a great job. I thought Helena Bonham Carter was very entertaining in this movie. She was easily the funniest character. Mrs. Lovett just constantly had hilarious comedic timing. Alan Richman is in this movie as the villain, and I thought that he was able to be this insanely hateable villain who you want to see brought down. And then the way that the movie ends was just very, very shocking, very poetic, and very tragic. And this movie ended up making me feel a lot sadder than I thought it was going to. So yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect from this movie going in, and I came out a pretty big Sweeney Todd fan. Number 4, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. The movie friend just did a little like point off screen. He loves this movie. This movie is just an absurdist comedy movie that I think is absolutely hilarious. This movie is fascinating to me because I think that this movie is a way more effective absurdist comedy than the other ones that Tim Burton has made, like Beetlejuice and Mars Attacks. I think that this movie is just way funnier than both of those movies, where you're on this adventure with this very, very childish man just trying to get his bike back. And it is a story that is just so ridiculous. You meet all of these very absurd, kooky characters, and there are elements of the movie that are just like very random and strange, where there's a ghost that shows up at one point, and at one point Pee-wee has to work with this man who's acting like a hardened criminal, but all he did was cut the tag off of a mattress, which I think is one of the funniest just things about this movie. There's elements of it that are strangely heartfelt when Pee-wee encourages this one lady to leave her like very emotionally distant, stifling boyfriend, and then it is a very absurd movie that is just constantly fun, constantly funny. There's a moment in this movie where Pee-wee has a fever dream where Satan shows up. That is a sentence that should not exist, but I am very happy that it does. Number 3, this is where I think we get into the movies on this list that made me feel the most, which is why they are in the top 3. First up, we have Big Fish. So I really didn't know anything about the movie going into it, and I got a very, very touching, heartfelt story where it's basically this son who's trying to understand his father because his father is going to die soon. But his father has only ever told his son these very exaggerated tall tales about his life. And so the movie is kind of this journey through this one man's entire life story through these exaggerated tall tales. And it's just a very fun, imaginative movie with a lot of very ridiculous stories that the dad is telling. The whole time he's played by Ewan McGregor, who is just really, really fun as this very optimistic, kind person. And it's a movie that has romance elements to it. It's a movie that has like very fun comedic moments. The funniest parts of this movie involve Steve Buscemi. I loved him in this movie. And yeah, no, I just really, really enjoyed seeing this very ridiculous life story of a man who just kind of touches the lives of everybody around him in these very exaggerated ways. And the ending of this movie is my favorite ending to any Tim Burton movie. This movie's ending, it actually did get to me emotionally, and it almost made me cry. It was just such a poetic, emotionally satisfying way to close out this movie. And so, yeah, I think if you have never seen Big Fish before, you should definitely check this movie out, because it was just a shockingly emotional and creative story that I really enjoyed. Number 2, Ed Wood. So this is the other movie that Tim Burton has made besides Big Eyes that is based on a true story. This movie is a biopic about Ed Wood, who I had never heard of before starting this ranking. But apparently Ed Wood is a director from the 50s who is known for making some of the worst movies of all time. And so this is a movie all about his life story, and I was constantly captivated by this movie's telling of the story of Ed Wood, as it manages to simultaneously kind of make fun of Ed Wood, since he was just a totally incompetent filmmaker who was not good at making movies. But at the same time, it's also a movie that is very good at honoring who he was. Because, like, yeah, he wasn't a good filmmaker, but he was a very optimistic, passionate person who ended up making a lot of friends in the film industry and touching the lives of a lot of people. Most notably, Bela Lugosi, the actor who played Dracula. I thought that he was easily the best part of this movie. He was a super interesting character. And there were a lot of really emotional scenes involving him and Ed Wood, since they were apparently very close friends in real life. I really liked Johnny Depp's performance as Ed Wood. I actually think that this might be my favorite performance from him in a Tim Burton movie. It's not as, like, eccentric or exaggerated as a lot of other Johnny Depp performances, but he is just very good at portraying this insanely optimistic director. And so, yeah, I had a lot of fun with him in this movie. Yeah, no, in general, I just thought that this was a very fun, creative biopic that just had a lot of energy to it, and it explored the life of a very interesting man in a very interesting way. So, yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with Ed Wood. One more thing that I almost forgot to mention. This is also a shockingly progressive movie for the time that it came out, because this movie it explores the fact that Ed Wood in real life was actually a man who really enjoyed cross-dressing, and it doesn't really make fun of that at all. It portrays that in a completely serious way, and it ends up like exploring his romantic relationships in like a very interesting way, where it's actually very satisfying when in this movie he manages to finally find someone who actually accepts him for who he is. And like, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. But for me, number one has to be Edward Scissorhands. This has always been my favorite Tim Burton movie, and this is also a movie that I think is very interesting because it is one that Tim Burton has been very open about, is a movie that was a passion project for him, and it was kind of exploring his own life story, since in his life he always felt like an outsider in the town that he lived in, who was just viewed as a weirdo by everybody. And so this movie manages to explore that by having this very exaggerated version of it, where you have Edward Scissorhands, this man who was created as a science experiment and left unfinished by his creator, and so he has scissors for hands, and the entire town is fascinated by him. They exploit him a lot in this movie. They use him for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they kind of just view him as this weirdo outsider, and it is a very, very heartfelt, interesting story that I just think it is easily the most emotionally powerful film that Tim Burton has made. It also is a movie that has a surprising amount of social commentary, in my opinion, where like it kind of explores how like Edward in this movie needs help. And like there's an entire scene in the movie that I think is the funniest scene in the movie, where this doctor is asked by a police officer, is he gonna be okay? And the doctor proceeds to list off, well, he's like not socially skilled at all. He's like viewed as an outsider by everybody. He doesn't really have the skills to survive in today's society. And then the police officer asks, but is he going to be okay? And the doctor says, oh yeah, sure, he will be fine. And that is like the funniest scene in any Tim Burton movie, in my opinion. And it also pretty effectively conveys a message that this movie is kind of going for. And so I thought that that was also an interesting element to this movie. I think that Tim Burton's like style and the production design of this movie is also interesting, as you just have like Edward Scissorhands contrasted against this town that is just very bright, colorful, and exaggerated. And then there's also an interesting emotional element to this movie, where it's also kind of a romance story about Winona Ryder being the only person who understands Edward. And so, yeah, I thought that in just every way, this movie was really, really interesting, really creative, and in my opinion, it is the best movie that Tim Burton has made. So there you go. That is my ranking of every Tim Burton movie from worst to best. This video was way longer than I expected it to be. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below, what is your favorite Tim Burton movie? And I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. Wait, what's that? Beetlejuice! No! Wait!